everyone, I am back with another video. Today I am going to go over writing development, specifically the grasp development from ages 1 through 6, as well as scissor development. Alright, so let's begin. I'm going to start right here. And at 1 to 1.5 years old, a child will develop a palmar supinate grasp. Now when we break this down, this is a lot easier than it sounds. When you think palmar, I think of the palm, and supinate, remember, would be this side of your forearm. I always remember supinate as you're holding a bowl of soup. So imagine an imaginary bowl of soup here. You wouldn't be able to hold the soup if you were in pronate because it would fall off. So this is pronate and this is supinate. So palmar supinate grasp would be in the palm and it would be supinated. So this child is likely writing like this right now. There is nothing going on with scissors at 1 to 1.5 years because a child starts to develop their scissor interest at the age of 2 to 3. So let's move on to 2 to 3, starting from the top. The grasp at this age is a digital pronate grasp. And I drew a picture, but this one is kind of difficult to imagine just by seeing a picture. So I'm going to demonstrate it. So digital pronate looks like this. It looks really funny, but the way I remember this is that I think of digital and I think of DI and I think of the number 2. So at 2 years old, you're going to have a digital pronate grasp. As you can see, this is pronated and we are using just our 2 digits to really guide the pen. This is what it would look like on this side. Moving down to scissors at 2 to 3 years. So children at the age of 2 to 3 are going to start opening and closing scissors to snip. So snipping is very brief little cuts, and that's why I drew all those little snips at the bottom of the open and close sign. The reason I drew an open and close sign is because I think about a restaurant or a shop that has one of those business signs, and there's only 2 sides to it, open and close. So at the age of 2, a child will start to develop interest in 2 options of opening and closing scissors. And I thought that was an easy way to remember it. Another thing that happens at the age of 3 is that the child will be able to cut on a 6-inch line that is straight. So the most important thing to know is at 3, a child should be able to cut on a straight line. If you can't remember the 6 inches, that's okay, but the line that I drew right here is about 6 inches long. Okay, moving on to 3.5 to 4 years old. A child will have a static tripod grasp at this age. So static means that it's not moving, and a tripod would involve 3 fingers. So 1, 2, 3, try for 3, and it will look like this. This is a mature grasp, but remember it's static, so it's likely that they don't have as much wrist involvement here. They might be using their arm or their upper body in order to move the pen. 2 other things that I wanted to note developmentally is that at 3, a child is able to copy a cross, and at 3.5, they're able to copy a square. So they're starting to be able to draw some simple geometric shapes at this point by copying an example. It's also possible that the child may have a quadrupod grasp, and that's involving 4 fingers, quad for 4, and that just means they're putting the pen on their 4th finger and going like this. It's important to note that a tripod grasp and a quadrupod grasp are both adult grasps and they are functional, so some of you might write this way. And that's totally fine. This is just the progression of development that you will typically read about. And it just progresses from the static tripod or quadrupod to a dynamic tripod grasp. In some cases, you might end up with a quadrupod grasp, and that's okay as long as it's functional and it works for you. Moving down to scissor development, at 3.5, children are able to cut simple geometric shapes. So I drew the 3.5 right here and drew a circle for visual aid. And another easy way to remember this is that 3 and 5 have a lot of these curves that look almost like half circles. So that's how I remember that at the age of 3.5, you are cutting circles. Circles come before squares and other objects that have corners because corners are really hard. So think circles come before the more difficult shapes that have corners like squares and rectangles. Okay, so we're almost done. We're now at 4.5 to 6 years old. And between that age, children will develop a dynamic tripod grasp. So at this point, you are done with your grasp development, and a dynamic tripod will look like this, which should look exactly like the static tripod that I showed you, but the only difference is that a lot of this is coming from the wrists. So think dynamic, which means change, and I kind of think of like movement there. So you have dynamic changing movements. You start with the tripod that is static and then you move to a dynamic tripod. So really you're just enhancing this grasp. And once you get here, I also think that at 4.5 to 6 years of age, you start to think, what is this child doing at this age? They're likely going to be in maybe a kindergarten or pre-K program, and at that age you're starting to do a lot of activities in school that involve coloring, writing, and definitely holding different utensils and writing tools in your hand. So I think that's a very, very easy way to connect that age range to a dynamic tripod grasp. Moving on to scissors, just like I said before, now when you're at 4.5 years to 6 years of age, you are going to start working on the more complex shapes. So now we will be moving on to cutting simple figure shapes. And figures have different curves, like you have jagged corners, you might have smooth corners. So think about figures and how you would need to be able to do the circles and the corners in order to cut the entire shape. At 4.5, a child is able to cut out a square. An easy way to remember this is that there are 4 corners to a square. So that's it for my writing and scissor development skills. I hope this was helpful, and I will be doing more of these because I am reviewing all of my pediatric milestones right now. Have a great day, happy studying, and I'll see you next time. Take care.